I appreciate everybody being on the call today and for your patience, because I know we canceled the last Broadband Advisory Board meeting a couple months ago. So, a couple of things, and I wanted to keep the agenda light, a little bit less formal because, we are, because of a recent executive order that the governor issued, consolidating a lot of our broadband activities. So this speaks kind of to the Broadband Advisory Board, but also to, some additional requirements that the CBO has, as well as CDOT and the execution of our state broadband planning. The consolidation also included removing, or disbanding the Broadband Advisory Board. Just to kind of, in terms of why, I don't really know why. I think, we have our Broadband Deployment Fund, our Broadband Deployment Board, we have our Broadband Advisory Board. And so, I think the goal was just to consolidate some of these activities. So, but I do think that this, I've been on 2 of these so far, and we do have quite a few stakeholders that attend these meetings, a lot of industry folks, as well as government folks, but a lot of industry folks. And what I really want to do is I don't want to kind of disband this group, or the governor doesn't want to really disband this group without having some sort of a feedback process between the government and our stakeholders. So as a next step to this, and it's not a legislative step or an EO or anything like this, it's more internal to the CBO's policies and process, is that we're going to establish like an industry roundtable as we and I haven't figured out the cadence of the frequencies of meetings, but it's going to be a little bit of a less formal group, and anybody can attend, including obviously state stakeholders, community members, but definitely want to focus on industry to give them a platform to give us feedback as we develop our grant programs and execute on these federal dollars. It is a best practice, so I have asked a couple of states kind of how they manage their stakeholder groups, and that was one that came across that I thought would be a really great replacement for the Broadband Advisory Board. Kind of sounds like the same thing, but it's not necessarily an EO. It's more of a flexible agenda with allowing everybody to participate in those calls. So that's kind of the next steps for the Broadband Advisory Board 2.0, if you will. I'll pause and take any questions on that subject.
Yeah, Brandy, this is Jerry, the DORA representative. Just reading the executive order, it sounds like the CBO is still going to be the lead coordinator for the state agencies. Is that right?
Hey, Jerry, you're paused. Is that me?
Oh.
I'll come my screen. Go ahead, Jerry. Sorry, we missed your.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, just reading the executive order in general, it sounds like the CBO is still going to be the lead coordinator with state agencies. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes, we'll still be the lead coordinator. So the governor has tasked us with being liaison and so forth. And for the state, partners like DORA, DOLA, and so forth, I have a monthly CBO operations meeting. And it's a quick one, but it goes over all of the updates that that are happening with the CBO. And those will continue for as long as we need them. So there's different ways to get information.
And that's separate from the monthly newsletter from the CBO, or is that in conjunction?
It's separate from the monthly newsletter. And so I can, if you're not on the list, I can certainly add you to the list.
Yeah, I'm on the monthly newsletter list, but I'm not sure I'm on this other list.
Okay, I'll make sure you're added.
Okay, thanks. Then I just had a few general questions on the executive order, or we can be talking about that, or is that the?
We can talk about it.
Yeah, just a few questions just going through there. It says 99% of the households connected by 2027. Is it 2027, January 1st, December 31st, anytime during 2027, or how is the CBO interpreting that?
December 31st.
Okay, good. As much as flexibility.
Yeah.
Good. And then another question, it says high-speed internet. So is it pretty much up to the interpretation of the CBO, or we're going to be going the NTIA route of what's underserved and what's served, 120, 100 symmetrical, 25/3. The FCC's moving forward finally on 120, it looks like. So is there any thought there?
Yeah, so we left the speeds out of the EO, and I think we kind of learned a lesson there because we proposed some legislation, especially related to the broadband deployment board, where we were really prescriptive in our speeds and what we were trying to achieve from a funding perspective. And then the speeds changed, and then we had to go through another legislative cycle that took a long time to change the speeds. And so we left, so high speed internet we left that kind of broad because we didn't want to put speeds in there at the risk of them changing. And so, but most of our funding strategies will be the interpretation will be up to the federal government as far as what CBO interprets, because there's funding as part of our funding requirements. The NTIA and the Treasury have speed definitions, right? So, our funding strategies will be based on those requirements because we don't have any flexibility there. That's why we called it high-speed internet.
Will it be more specific in the proposals that are offered?
Yeah, so it'll be specific in the proposals that are submitted to us, to the state of Colorado, to move on for approval to the Treasury and the NTIA. So for example, and I'll go over this here shortly, is for our LOI process, where we have a letters of intent out, and we closed that process yesterday for communities to submit their ideas for what their broadband projects are, so we can develop our statewide plan. And in that process, the threshold is the requirement is 20 down, or gosh, so it's 20 down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have, it has to scale up to 100 symmetrical, right? So, it's 100 down, 20 up. That's our minimum. That's our minimum that you have to reach in terms of speed. And then it has to be scalable. You have to show that it's scalable if you can, depending on the program. So our definitions are really kind of dictated to us by the federal government, our funding programs. So our communities and ISPs, when they're submitting, they have to meet that requirement.
Great. Now, could you share how many LOIs you've gotten so far? We have yesterday, right?
Yeah, we closed yesterday. There's like one or two extensions I'm waiting for right now before I close the app. But we have about 85.
Great.
Yeah, we have 85. We did a lot of outreach, tons of outreach over the last 6 to 7 months. And I think it really helped get the word out. And we've had I would say that was a successful process. Now, the work now that needs to go forward is going through all of those and determining, which projects, the state's going to focus on, or at least work with communities on it. The LOI process wasn't any sort of requirement for our actual grant program that we're going to launch at the beginning of 2023. We just want to see what people's ideas are and start working with them on some of their proposals, so that by the time we get to our application process, these projects are pretty well baked from like an implementation and requirement perspective, so that we're trying to be efficient. So just a lot of pre-planning going on right now with our public.
Great. Well, that sounds great. Good move moving forward on that. Thanks, Randy.
Great. So I touched on the next steps for the Broadband Advisory Board. For our state partners, definitely let me know if you're not on that CBO monthly operations update. And so just send me an email. I can make sure you're added to it. There's probably about 50 people on that right now. And then, so as far as we talked about the EO, CDOT and CBO have a lot of to-do lists on that, but the directives are that we connect 99% of households to broadband high-speed internet by 2027, and then CBO coordinates with CDOT and other partners on some of the issues or implementation issues or projects that we have going forward. And so as far as what we're working on with the CBO, I talked a little bit about the LOI process. So thank you to everybody who participated in that. We received a really, really great response. So the next steps for that, because the LOI process, the spirit of that is to use that information to develop the state's plan to submit to the Treasury Department, our capital projects fund plan. And so we need to we need to submit that by the end of September. And we're on track to do that. I'll pause and take a question from Scott. Go ahead, Scott.
Thanks, Brandy. Going back to the previous discussion, are any of those applications that you've received, do they anticipate wireless meeting some of those goals? In terms of getting to the 99%, I know a lot of the counties are very rural. Are there wireless applications that are anticipated there?
Not for capital projects that I know of right now. Capital projects fund is wireline. There's a preference for fiber. And so, we're going to be looking at that. I think in the capital projects fund, you can look at wireless, but it's as a last resort. And I do know, I'm not under any illusion that, our state can be served by all fiber. It's just, it's going to be really expensive. I think, we're going to have to prioritize what we do in different areas in terms of technology mixes. Now, what qualifies for grant funding is probably the big question mark, because most of the federal programs, there's a preference for fiber. And so I think it works when your state's kind of pancake flat with no mountains and stuff like that. But even wireless in the mountain areas is challenging because you have a lot of the massive tree canopy. I mean, there's a lot of people that struggle with just the fixed wireless stuff. So I think we're all going to have to work collectively together to figure out what technology mix is going to work in some of our really, really hard to reach areas.
Yeah, and with our newer technologies, we can almost meet those speeds that are required, so I think it's something that should be considered,
yeah,
pretty seriously.
Yeah, we'll consider what we can, sorry, there's an echo on the call. We'll consider what we can, what's eligible for funding. So that's what I've kind of told people. We have a box we have to work in. So we'll do our best to see if we can entertain other types of technology. It seems like there might be some flexibility out there, but it's probably going to be a case-by-case basis as far as the federal government's concerned.
Sure, that makes sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. So thanks for that question. So we wrapped up. So we'll be putting our plan we'll be submitting our plan to Treasury, the Capital Projects Fund plan, in September. Yes, go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I did have just a question on the LOI responses, and I'm sure you've got this from a lot of people, that 1,000 characters was fairly difficult to even summarize some of our projects, especially when they were regional responses and had many different components. So are you going to follow up with us to try to get the more detailed description of the projects as you go forward? And do you have an idea what mechanism that might be? Will be another application on that we uploaded to, or just send you like Word docs or with greater explanation and pricing and things like that?
Yeah. So yeah, I appreciate the feedback. We definitely had to keep the character limit, because if not, we would probably have 85 20-page LOIs, and that would just, and I didn't want people to have to put in a ton of work there on that, especially because we're developing the plan. The details will come later in our official grant application process, but we wanted a really high level conceptual, what are you thinking for your project, a couple of bullet points on what you're trying to achieve in your proposal. As far as the next steps after the LOI, we will be meeting with some of the folks that submitted the LOI. My goal was to do it all within the first 2 weeks of the process, but when we receive so many, there's no way you can set up 85 meetings in 2 weeks. It just, there's not enough hours in the day, so it's going to take us a little bit longer. So we're going to spend the next couple of weeks reviewing the LOIs and setting up appointments with the people that submitted those, and also, if there's some that we probably won't need to meet with, because the LOI is pretty straightforward, but if we have any questions, we'll be reaching out to some of those that we need more points of clarification before we can score. Or not score, but just like, just in terms of serious consideration for our planning efforts. And so, so we'll be doing that over the next month and a half. Great. Okay. So I talked about capital projects funds. We are going to launch our official application process at the beginning of 2023. And so, be on the lookout for that. The next steps for the CBO, our most immediate deadline is August 15th. We are submitting, so that the state submitted a letter of intent to the NTIA to participate in BEAD, Broadband Equity Access and Deployment. That program, the state will at a minimum receive $100 million. We're projecting around 500 million, but we could get up anywhere to $700 million. Yes, Diana, you can go ahead and raise your hand.
Sorry, I think I waved at you all instead of raising my hand.
Okay.
Good to see everybody. I had just a quick question on the LOIs. I'm wondering and curious as to the dollar amount, the total dollar amount that was submitted, because I know that also goes to the state's need as you're submitting your plan in September.
Yeah, so we had most everybody that submitted an LOI put in a dollar amount. There were some that did not. And so we'll probably have to follow up with those folks individually and figure out kind of what their estimate was. But I told folks to, fill out as much as you can. I know that, in order to fill some of this stuff out, you have to already have some of this stuff engineered, but that wasn't the point. We just want to get a sense of what you're projecting as far as households served in your project potentially. But out of the folks that did submit a number, we had over $2.3 billion in requests for LOIs.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah. So I know some of those are estimates, so that's probably an estimated number. And if some of the folks had submitted an actual number, we'd probably be closer to 2.5 billion. So, or maybe more, I'm not quite sure. So we'll have to follow up with people after this.
Thank you. I was just curious. So that certainly speaks to the state's needs.
Yeah, it exceeded the amount that I thought would be submitted. But it's good to capture the need, and really it makes a case for continued investment even beyond I think some of these federal programs that we're implementing right now, because we just don't have enough money to serve everybody. Okay, so anyway, back to BEAD. I'm submitting so the state in their letter of intent process, we actually we applied for a $5 million planning grant associated with BEAD. This will help us develop our 5-year action plan for BEAD, which is due next May. And also there's capacity around that too. The other thing I want to highlight about our planning money is I really want to carve out a space in our budget to provide additional technical assistance to communities they're not staffed or have the money or capacity to do certain things around planning for BEAD. It won't be a lot of money, but it'll be some money. I recognize that there's a need out there, and the state actually does. And so I'm talking internally with folks about how do we provide that service to communities. So as of right now, the state of Colorado has decided to hire basically grant writers, technical assistant grant writer types, individuals that are managed by the state of Colorado that will be embedded in your regional council of governments. So depending on your region, you'll have somebody available to you to help you with writing your grant applications, especially to BEAD. That is a very, very large program, and it's going to be pretty complicated. So just like a lot of federal funding programs, and we recognize that there's a need for capacity building, especially in rural parts of Colorado that just don't have the resources. And those are the ones that we need to serve the most because they just don't have service. So that's happening. But I want to actually tack on a little bit of money if I can in our planning grant that we'll submit on August 15th to at least help folks that don't have the resources. And so that's August 15th. And then in terms of our planning efforts, we're working on them. We know our deadlines and so forth. And so the other thing that we have to do as far as our BEAD, we have to submit our BEAD plan at the end of September as well, or at least have a pretty good sense of what we're doing there. So so we can start the process for the bigger bead, money, the bigger planning piece of our bead strategy. So there's a couple of different deadlines that we have that we're going to meet. And then the FCC piece of that, because I know maps come up all the time. The fabric, or the location fabric for the state of Colorado has been made available to the state. And I know ISPs are required to submit their data to the FCC. Our official challenge process for the mapping that will for BEAD will be it's in September. They'll open that up in September. So we're working on our maps now, and we're hiring a couple of vendors to help us get service location level data, so that we're really accurate. We can tell what's going on. We know who's unserved and underserved, and it's not based on data that's like marketing data or something or some other metrics. So we're self-reported metrics. We'll still from the Broadband Deployment Board you'll still have to report your data as an ISP to the state because that's in legislation. But what we're really happy about is we'll be able to kind of vet. Sorry, I thought my computer stopped. But we'll be able to vet that self-reported data against actual speed tests out there in the state of Colorado. So we're working on that right now. So we'll have better maps. And so we will have a public process around some of that data. So once we're done working on our maps, we'll make those available to everybody so that they can look at them and give us any feedback, because we see this as a partnership between community, ISPs, and the state in terms of getting our maps right. If we don't have our maps right, that could cost us hundreds of millions of dollars for the BEAD program. So we want to make sure that we get as much money from the federal government as possible in the BEAD program. So our maps will need to be as accurate as possible. So that's what we're going to be working on later this summer and through the fall. And so you'll just want to get regular updates from the CBO on that through our newsletter process. So I know I've talked a lot, and I know you guys have asked really good questions. One last plug that I'll put in our last thing is that, through House Bill 1289 in our last legislative cycle, the governor the governor also did in his EO, but we also in that funding bucket of that piece of legislation that the Colorado Broadband Office was to do a digital government strategy that was funded. And so we're in the process of doing that right now. So I just want to say thank you to all of those who provided data or filled out the survey, and some of you guys were asked to do specific stakeholder interviews. So I just want to say I appreciate the time you guys took to help inform our strategy. The data is really it's great. So I'm really excited. We're halfway through. We're halfway through the project. So we've wrapped up our stakeholder engagement piece of that. The next phase of that is actually coming up with our strategy recommendations. So once we're finished with that, I'll make that public as well, so you can see what the state's thinking in terms of our broadband strategy. So that'll help inform our grant program as well, where we're going to focus on some of the funding. So with that being said, does anybody have any questions or any additional questions or feedback? So,
hey Brandy,
yeah.
It's Rick Garcia.
Hey Rick.
Hey, I don't think I've had a chance to see you, so congratulations. I know it's been a while now on your new position. I just want to make the folks aware. I think everyone probably is, but since there hadn't been a broadband advisory board meeting previously, and I did have a representative from DOLA covering the base for me. I want to make sure everybody is aware that Greg Winkler retired from Colorado state government. And obviously we have a big hole to fill within our regional manager structure to devise a a regional manager within our field personnel that can come up to speed quickly on all the work and the wealth of background and information that Greg brought as being our broadband focused regional manager. So we'll be working on that. And I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware that I already miss Greg. He was a great resource to us all, and most of you worked with him much longer than I did. But in this broadband world, our middle mile still is very much front and center of the work that we'll continue to be focusing on as it relates even to our regular funding programs outside of the federal dollars that Brandy just talked about. Of course, that's our Energy Impact Program. But more to come on that, but I just wanted to make sure everybody who's been involved with this broadband office is aware of Greg's departure. So thanks for a few minutes to say that.
Yeah, Greg will definitely be missed. He was a great asset to the state, and I'm happy that he's retired and can get some rest and do some other things that he's probably has planned. I don't think he'll completely go away, but he'll definitely, he's probably being asked questions as we speak. So, but yeah, he was a great asset. Thanks for that, Rick. Dion.
Hi, Brandy. Hey, thanks for putting the meeting together. Just really quick, you said that in the LOI process, there was over 2 billion. Did I hear that right? Requested?
Yeah.
Okay. And then right now you have an initial 100 million that you've requested. Do I have this story right there?
We have, so in our capital projects fund, we have 162 million available for that program, which is what we focused on for the LOI process, because we have to submit our LOI, our grant plan to the Treasury at the end of September. Okay. So, yeah.
All right. And with this over 2 billion that you've requested, or that has been requested, what percentage of that is going to be represented in the request that we put forward then, or is this 162 what you're going after initially?
Yeah, so so we're going after the 162 million. They're in the LOI process. I asked folks if they were interested in applying to the middle mile program, and that's anywhere from 5 million to 100 million. I'm not sure, but individuals, you guys can apply, community or ISP, whatever, any kind of partnership you have or consortium, you can apply directly to the NTIA for middle mile. The state does plan to apply to the middle mile program, and I see Bob Pfeiffer on the call, and definitely probably leveraging CDOT as the applicant for that. So, CBO will support CDOT in their efforts because that just makes sense from a practical matter. And so, but the capital projects fund, it's a smaller amount of money. I never thought it was a lot of money, but I'm not going to turn down money that's available. But it will help. It will help, make a dent in our digital divide, but it's definitely pretty short when you look at the number. But there is a lot of opportunity in the BEAD program, tons of opportunity in the BEAD program to chip away at our digital divide. Again, those numbers that people submitted are estimates. So, I didn't ask them for, 30% engineering designs with cost estimates or anything like that, because that wasn't, there'll be plenty of time to spend a lot of money on that sort of thing when we get to our official grant application process. So some people already had their numbers. So, there's a couple of strategic plans that I'm aware of right now where I'm sure they were able to pull their number from their 5-year, planning period, project plans. But a lot of it is kind of estimations and stuff like this at that point. But it's still a really high number, even beyond just estimation, which helps give the state some information on, okay, well, what is the reality? What are the costs per location, per passing? We have some data from our strategic plan that we're working on, but this is a really good opportunity to see exactly how much it's going to cost to serve some areas.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yep. Craig.
Hey, Brandy. Do you have an update on the CDOT progress towards the end of August due date for the fiber lease and right of way program?
I'll let Bob speak to that. Are you on the call, Bob? Is he still here? I don't see Bob on the call. He must have jumped off. So your question was, what's the update on the permitting process, the right of way permitting process and fee structure that CDOT's supposed to do by the end of August?
Yeah, it seems like we're a little bit more than a month out, and there's a whole lot in that paragraph of the EO. And just curious how, what kind of progress they're making, and if that's realistic to have that out by then.
I don't know, but I do know that those deadlines in the EO are pretty firm deadlines. So I'm sure CDOT's working on it. But yeah, I don't have an answer to that question. And it's I think Bob just jumped off. So
Okay, thank you.
any other questions? Oh, actually, there's one in the chat. Did you all look at the Cost Quest data? We heard about it at the Mountain Connect conference. Yes, we have looked at the Cost Quest data. All right. Do we have any other questions? All right, so if there's no other questions, I'll give you a few minutes left back in your day. Again, this is our kind of our wrap up for the BAB for now. Please look, if you're not subscribed to our newsletter, please subscribe. I will have communication on the next steps, just recognizing that this stakeholder group is still very important to the state of Colorado and the CBO. And so we'll definitely set up a forum for people to still participate and give us feedback and ask questions and get updates from us, because that's very important. And I think it'll become more important as we move through the planning for the federal monies and stuff. So I just want to say I appreciate all of you on the call and all the time you dedicated to this over the past couple of years. And I still look forward to your engagement and involvement in broadband for the state of Colorado. So always available for questions. So if you have anything, just send me an email. And then if you're not, so for this internal state partners on the call, if you would like, I can just send me a note if you want to be added to my my monthly CBO internal operations meeting where you'll get all this information there. With that, you guys enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll probably catch you in the field somewhere. So thanks so much, you guys. Have a good one.